Please start, Anne.
If you've been awake for a while, good evening. For the rest of us, good afternoon and good morning. Thank you for joining us wherever you are in the world. My name is Anne Mitaru, and I will be your host and moderator for this event. A warm welcome to you on the launch of the Global Report on Children's Care and Protection, where we'll be seeking to understand and discuss how we can prevent the separation of children from their families. It also happens to be the International Day of Care, so happy International Day of Care and Support. The attention of international laws and policy debates to preventing the unnecessary separation of children from their family has grown significantly over the years across human rights, development, and humanitarian spaces. Those actors have been discussing this particularly since the adoption of the rights of the child, of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which came into play 35 years ago. Yet, millions of children are still deprived of their right to family life, and they're exposed to heightened risks of harm, poor development outcomes, because care and support systems continue to fail to protect them. It's widely agreed, however, in light of this, that preventing this separation and mitigating the impact of child-family separation requires, like in most problems, that we address the root causes. As such, this is what brings us to the table here. In today's event, we will share new evidence on the main factors that drive families apart, and what we will present is recommendations for change, including perspectives that children and young people have shared from research and case studies in 8 countries. We are SOS Children's Villages Federation, and in partnership with universities and international experts from around the world, we've contributed to this global report. In today's webinar, we will present the findings and the results of this report on the root causes of separation of children and their families. And our participants will discuss the meaning of its findings and see how we can enhance policy and practice. So buckle up, get a drink, get something, that will hold your attention, and we hope that you will take this ride with us. You are joining us, and our target audience for this report is really anyone who's working to improve care and protection interventions for children and their families, whether it's at a national level, a regional level, or international level. And it includes, particularly so, policy and decision makers, researchers, advocates, practitioners, service providers, and donors. The format for today's meeting will be, we'll have a mix of presentations where the researchers will present their findings. We will have input from children and young people and adults who have knowledge of child and family separation, and we will thereafter take comments and questions from the audience. It's an interactive format that we hope will promote, an exchange between a wide cross-section of policymakers, researchers, practitioners, care experts, and people who've had the lived experience of being separated from their families. Okay, so without further ado, we'll just go through some ground rules. If you are in the audience, we ask that you mute your microphone, and you can write your questions and comments in the chat at any time, okay? We should just say that due to the high number of speakers, we might not be able to answer all your questions, but if after the event there are questions that we have not addressed, we will write, and using your email addresses, we will write to you and answer those questions, okay? All right, we shall open this webinar with a speech by the president of our SOS Children's Villages Federation, and this will be followed by a presentation of the report and discussion of experts who've been part of this process. All right, so I'm going to introduce our president, Dereje. Dereje, I don't know if you're there.
I am here.
Very, very warm welcome. I don't know where you're joining us from today, but you will explain when you open. Dr. Dereje Wardolfa
I'm in
is the,
Vienna.
say that again?
I'm in Vienna.
Fantastic. You're in Vienna. Dr. Dereje Wardolfa is the president of SOS Children's Villages International. We are a global organization supporting children without parental care and facing the risk of losing parental care. He has over 30 years of experience in international development and humanitarian leadership, and he has championed children's rights and family support through roles at Oxfam Save the Children, the Americans Friends Service Committee, and the United Nations, where he served as Assistant General, Secretary General, and Deputy Executive Director of UNFPA. As president, he is dedicated to advancing our federation's mission and strengthening the partnerships we need to promote the well-being of vulnerable children throughout the world. A warm welcome, Dereje.
Thank you, Anne, for such a introduction. Let me join you in saying good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, wherever you are. I am very, very happy to be here today to deliver brief remarks at this online event of launching the report titled Global Report on Children's Care and Protection. This landmark report deeply examines the root causes of child-family separations and provides insightful recommendations on how to address these issues effectively. On behalf of our federation, I wish to extend our deepest gratitude to all experts, colleagues, partners, and SOS teams for the research and also successful production of the global report that we launch now. Lessons from our 75 years of practices tell us that children who grow up without a safe, stable, secure, and nurturing family environment face significant challenges. These challenges hinder their development, degrade their rights, and restrict their ability to become integrated and be active members of their communities. In many cases, these challenges are transferred across generations. Preventing unnecessary separations is not just possible, it is imperative. By understanding and addressing the root causes, we can ensure that children grow up in nurturing, loving environments where they can truly thrive. As a worldwide care movement with members from 135 countries and territories, our mission is to support children who have lost or are at risk of losing parental care. We work to ensure that these children placed in suitable care environments with basket of care options to serve the best interest of each child. Whether this involves supporting them within their own families, providing quality alternative care, or assisting those who are forcibly displaced due to war, climate change, or other humanitarian crises, we are there with care options. Our direct field experience through delivering family support programs that may reduce separation of children from their family has grown that effective planning for a range of preventable services requires robust evidence to understand the drivers of separation and develop relevant responses to them. This is why this global report we launched today is both timely and critical. The findings of the report will inform our practices, drive innovation, and strengthen our advocacy efforts to influence public policy, micro budgets, and social protection programs at both national and global levels. This may pave the way if we consistently advocate for necessary structural changes. As the Africa proverb says, it takes a village to raise a child. The proverb suggests collective or communal responsibility to raise children. Therefore, public institutions delivering social services, civil society organizations like us, the private sector, the academia, must all come together. Each stakeholder brings unique knowledge, expertise, and strengths to help better equip families to nurture their children. Simply, collaboration and continuous innovations are essential. Above all, we must continue to listen and respond meaningfully to children, their caregivers, and families. They are best positioned to tell us what is needed and what must be done. I am very much encouraged to see that the research for this global report was conducted in a participatory manner, including children's voices. As you will learn today in detail, the report's findings highlight a complex interplay of factors driving child-family separations. This range from severe poverty affecting individual families to geopolitical challenges and the effects of climate shocks. Our other factors including societal norms, influencing perceptions and gender and violence, as well as systemic issues that limit families across to social protection and justice. Preventing child-family separation is not only more cost effective, but also essential to meeting the best interest of every child. We believe that the findings and analysis presented in this global report will be invaluable to those committed to supporting children's rights. Let us continue to invest and work together to prevent child-family separation, which affects millions of children worldwide. Let us put the lessons from this research into action. We owe no less to all children currently living without the nurturing bonds of a family. I wish you good deliberations and I thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much there, President Dereje. Very, very, very aptly put. So we'll go into our session where now we understand what's this report about. And to do this, I'd like to introduce very key people who've been part of writing this. Ms. Rosie Willie, Dr. Rosalind Olumbe, Dr. Chrissy Gale, and Dr. Claudia Arisi. By quick introduction, Rosie is a research and learning advisor at SOS Children's Villages International. She has 15 years of experience with research and development across Austria, Armenia, Bulgaria, Lebanon, Jordan, and South Africa. And in her work, she specializes in participatory research with children and young people. She's also a postgrad researcher at the Institute of Development Studies with the Sussex University. She focuses on child well-being in refugee mobilities and displacement contacts and family support interventions. Rosie, welcome. But before that, I will also introduce other experts. We have Dr. Rosalind Olumbe, who is a senior lecturer and coordinator at Daystar University Institute of Child Development in Kenya. She holds a PhD in holistic child development and has over 20 years experience in research and teaching. Dr. Olumbe has developed curricula on child protection and caring for children with disabilities and contributed to Kenya's national guidelines for psychosocial support of orphans and vulnerable children. Beyond this, as a researcher, she is a managing editor of the Interdisciplinary Journal on Child Protection and an associate editor of the School of Psychology International. Very warm welcome, Dr. Rosalind Olumbe. We have Dr. Chrissy Gale. Dr. Chrissy Gale has over 30 years of experience in promoting child rights with a focus on child protection and alternative care globally. She has worked with international organizations such as UNICEF, the UN Part for Children, UNHCR, the UN Part for Refugees, and UNRWA, the UN part that serves in the occupied Palestinian territories, Save the Children, and Oxfam. And alongside, she has had a long academic career. She previously led international work at the Center for Excellence for Children's Care and Protection at the University of Strathclyde, where she managed global child protection programs. She continues as a senior honorary research fellow at that University of Strathclyde and is a lecturer at ASH University in Berlin. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Gill. We have Dr. Claudia Arisi, who's our global policy and advocacy advisor at SOS Children's Villages International. She comes to this table with a dual PhD in political science and labor studies, and she has 15 years of experience in social protection policies and child rights advocacy. She, Dr. Risi, has led several global research projects, public awareness campaigns, and capacity building initiatives, which amplify the voices of children and young people in policy processes. For example, the work around the Sustainable Development Goals, the global study of children deprived of liberty, and very importantly to this discussion, the UN Day of General Discussion of Children's Rights and Alternative Care. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Arisi. So without further ado, I won't introduce you again. Once each speaker finishes their section, they can introduce the next person. Miss Willie Rosie, over to you.
Yes. So thank you so much, Anne, and hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So today we're presenting for the first time the outcomes of a 2-year research project which looks at drivers contributing to the separation of children and their families and provides recommendations on how to prevent separation where possible. So we carried out this research project together with 10 academic partners worldwide, which I'll introduce to you in just a moment, because estimates continue to highlight that there are millions of children who have been separated from their families and are living in alternative care across the globe. While sometimes separation of a child from parents becomes necessary for protection reasons, such as in cases of abuse, there is growing awareness of the fact that most of these children are there for reasons that are preventable. But what are those reasons? What we have seen in existing research is that there is limited information on the factors and dynamics that lead children to become separated from their parents in the first place, especially from low and middle income contexts. Moreover, there is scarcity of data considering the perspectives and lived experiences of children, young people, adults in the family, and those working to protect them. Finally, there are limited comparative studies looking at patterns and trends across different contexts on this topic, including dynamics around decision-making on separation in the child protection system. And not fully understanding the reasons for separation makes it very difficult to design effective policies and services to support families and prevent this situation. So essentially, the aforementioned evidence gaps informed how we approached the topic and the research components. So we combined global insights with localized data to provide a holistic view of the topic, and meaning that there were 2 main research components. The first included comprehensive literature scoping, including a systematic literature review conducted by scholars of Brown University and research data and policy reviews by SOS Children's Villages staff. And through the global literature scoping, we were interested in finding out how separation of children from their families is framed and discussed in literature and policy. The second was the primary research, which employed a participatory approach involving children, young people, adult family members, and professionals working in the child protection system across 8 different contexts. This explored how children are separated from parental care and placed in formal alternative care, with further follow-up research conducted on how decisions are made about the removal of children from their families in the child protection system, and what factors influence these decisions. We are absolutely honoured to have had the opportunity to collaborate with these research partners who worked on various of these research components. The researchers were from various disciplines, including social policy, social work, anthropology, sociology, public health, and psychology, and with different regional expertise to ensure that we approach the topic from various perspectives. More than 50 researchers and professionals conducted and supported the research, and there were more than 1,000 research participants, including children, young people, adult family members, and professionals. At this point, I'd like to thank each and every one of them for their important contribution to enabling the research. So now moving on to what we have understood from the literature and the debate on the topic. Children may experience various forms of separation from family members, such as a parent, sibling, or other significant adults during their lives. In research and policy discussions, separation is mainly understood as the physical separation of a child from parents or other primary caregivers. International law and guidance emphasize that separating a child from parental care should be avoided unless absolutely necessary for the child's safety and best interests. When parental care is not possible, care by kin is recognized as the first form of care that should be explored before considering other alternative care options. Our review of academic and non-academic sources revealed that actually identifying which children are affected by or at risk of separation is a significant challenge. Around the world, various terms and definitions are used to describe these children, for example, children without parental care or unaccompanied children. This also implies different ways of collecting data on these children. In the literature, there was often quite a fragmented approach, focusing on specific cases and specific situations rather than studies providing a comprehensive perspective, even though children may potentially experience multiple situations simultaneously. And these situations in which children may face or be at risk of separation may vary according to gender and age, or across social and cultural contexts. For example, a child born out of wedlock may be at heightened risk of abandonment or separation in one context, while not in another. So while not exhaustive, the list of situations presented in the report and on this slide underscores the complexity of separation and highlights the need for more precise definitions and enhanced data collection. When it comes to the primary research, this was mixed methods research involving qualitative, participatory, and quantitative methods. On the slide here, you can see the research countries, which were selected to achieve regional representation as far as possible. A mix of low, middle, and high-income contexts represent differently set up child protection systems and different socioeconomic contexts. A partnership with a local university was set up with the local SOS Children's Villages Association in each country, and ethical approval for the research was secured. And now it's my pleasure to hand over to Dr. Chrissy Gale, who was the lead researcher of the primary researcher, as well as Dr. Rosaline Olumbe, who conducted the research in Kenya, who will be sharing more about the methodology and findings and providing country examples from Kenya.
Hello, everyone, and I'd just like to say again how delighted I am to join everyone today. And I also want to express my thanks to SOS Children's Villages for asking me to lead this research. I think it's been really, really timely and very, very important. I'm going to tell you, along with my colleague Dr. Olumbe, a little bit about the research we conducted in those 8 countries that have been mentioned. So we started by doing a desk review for each country so that we totally understood the context in which children and families were living in, and particularly looked at the socioeconomic, political and cultural backgrounds in those countries, as well as trying to examine what was already evaluated of the National Child Protection System. We then conducted participatory research workshops in each country with children aged 13 to 15-year-olds who were living with their families but maybe living in vulnerable circumstances but had not been placed in alternative care, as well as care experienced young people who had left alternative care aged between 17 to 25-year-old in each of the 8 countries, and adult family members, mostly females and mostly mothers. We also conducted, as you will see, 95 semi-structured interviews with professionals ranging from social workers and their equivalent as child protection officers, heads of government departments, members of the judiciary, and sometimes other people such as doctors, nurses, etc. And we also conduct an online survey with the same professionals across 7 of the countries around the world. Most importantly, though, for me, was that we upheld the right of children to participate in decision-making. We recognise that they're competent social actors who should be actively involved in shaping their own social worlds. We wanted to make sure we heard from all stakeholders, and to do that, it was vital to involve them in all of the research that we did and to be able to give them a voice and listen to what they know that is happening to children, young people and families in their communities, and to listen to what they said to us. What are their solutions? What do they want to see change? How can we stop unnecessary separation of families? Therefore, in the first instance, we worked with children and young people in El Salvador and Lebanon, where we sought their input into co-defining the actual research questions we were going to use and the research methodology that we then developed and used in all 8 countries with children, young people, and with family members. So what were we trying to find out? Well, most importantly, we wanted to know what happens in the family home that might put children at risk of losing parental care and being placed in alternative care. So some of the main questions we were asking was, when children and young people are at home and family members are together, what makes children, young people and adult family members worried or unhappy? What are the challenges inside the household? But what makes them happy? What bonds them? What keeps them strong and united? What do we need to make sure we create a situation within the family home that will prevent separation? And to do that, what are their solutions? We didn't ask personal questions. We were very ethically sound and rigorous in our research. So we asked them to represent what was happening in families within their own communities. And now I'm going to ask my colleague, Dr. Olumbe, who worked with me in partnership in Kenya, to give us a little bit of an example of the research with participants in her country.
Thank you, Chrissy. And so we get to the research methodology, a very interesting study. I think I must comment first, SOS Children Villages, but also Chrissy and just the designing here. As you can see, we had a very interactive experience with the children so that we make it engaging. I think personally as a researcher, it was enjoyable, it was fun, because we had activities that kept us, although it would take about 5 hours, it was possible to keep children engaged, but personally also very engaged and participating. As you can see, we have different colors, and so the green basically represented what children would share, maybe the good thing that happens at home, and the pink would represent the bad thing that happens at home, or based on our questions. And again, as we have said, it's not very personal. They were sharing this in general. As we look at this, apart from the interactivity, there were energizers, there were activities that children were able to engage in. Now, what we see, and part of the things, apart from just them sharing what makes them sad and what makes them happy, it was a fact of them also bringing out solutions. And so on my left, you can see the solutions for the younger children was to share a superhero. And for some of them, the superhero would be like their parent or their religious inclination, either God, Jesus, and such. And this was just to share, if you are a superhero, what solutions would you bring to the problems facing children? And it was amazing what some of them shared, as you can see there. But on the other hand, for the young adults, we asked them to do a solution tree. And so right at the trunk, it was the problems that actually faced young people. And at the top, the leaves represented the solutions they would actually suggest to the problems that they face. And what we found was that this was actually a way of children and young people sharing issues that face them without feeling threatened. And so it was non-invasive, and they gladly shared the information with us as we would see that. And I need to point out, we had an SOS counselor on spot in case any child or any young person would have an issue to share, where they would go and debrief. And this gave us amazing results. And I think as we proceed, yes, proceed on.
Thank you so much. And I have to say it was a delight to work with Dr. Olumbi and other colleagues in the 8 countries that we were doing the research in. And that included Dr. Mosby Jensen, who we also worked with in Denmark, who also helped us adapt the methodology so that we could actually engage children with disabilities in our research. And indeed, in Denmark, we actually worked with children who were quite high on the autism spectrum scale, and also children who were nonverbal. And we were able to adapt this methodology that Dr. Olumbe has just described. So we could work with children in Denmark and Lebanon, Indonesia and Kyrgyzstan who had different forms of disability. Now to come to our findings, I have to say, again, I want to thank everyone who participated in our research because they really shared with us incredible data and information. And what we found is a really strong correlation of all the information that were provided by all the participants, including children with disabilities, which is why we've been able to summarize all the data in our research reports to show that we found lots of the same information that we were able to triangulate. And some of the common themes that emerged from low, middle and income countries were very, very similar, with, of course, some contextual specificities, such as maybe prevalence. So perhaps we saw more labour migration in places like Kyrgyzstan and Indonesia. We saw perhaps more violence and abuse in some of the other countries, such as Kenya and Cote d'Ivoire, coming out. But most of all, we also found some very common themes running across all the different contexts. There were many, many findings, and it's been very, very difficult for us to encapsulate them in maybe just these 3 headlines. But what we want to say is that overall, the primary reasons children are being placed in alternative care is firstly because of all forms of violence. That's physical, sexual and emotional violence and serious neglect. And the reason why I say serious neglect is we have to recognize that sometimes there are situations where maybe professionals think a child is being neglected, but it's just the fact that maybe it is a family who are facing some very difficult financial circumstances. Maybe all the family have only 1 meal a day, and this is not intentional neglect. This is actually a signal that there should be more support for a family rather than removing a child into alternative care. There were also many issues related to multidimensional poverty. And again, I want to say that there are many millions of families around the world who are living and facing the challenges of poverty, but are able to create a secure and loving and protective environment for their children and don't have to be separated from them. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, whereas unfortunately, some cases, this aspect of poverty does lead to separation. And then also, there was the functioning of the National Child Protection System and decision making. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as the situation in Kenya, but particularly when there are situations where maybe social workers or those working within the National Child Protection System are not able to function well. So from our next slide, you're going to see that there are many, many multidimensional factors, and these were some of the main findings that we heard from the research participants. So, for example, how factors in the wider society really can impact families and pose challenges. So we're talking about violence in the community, and that might be war, gang warfare, violence in schools, civil unrest, many social and cultural norms and beliefs, stigma and discrimination, such as gender, bias and also discrimination against people with disabilities, living in a patriarchal society that can lead to gender-based violence. As we've talked about, economic conditions and lack of access to services. And I want to say that really a lot of our participants, particularly adult family members, said, we want to be independent. We want to be able to provide for our families, but we need access to the employment and the services that would help us really be able to provide for our families. And then often a lack of awareness of child rights and child protection. So maybe not understanding positive discipline rather than the use of violence. We can see that there's an impact at family level. So we found a lot of intergenerational violence, violence against children, domestic and gender-based violence, intergenerational depleted parenting ability, coping mechanisms being depleted, the stress on facing the challenges leading to poor mental health and emotional well-being, and sometimes resorting to use of negative coping mechanisms, such as we see in Kyrgyzstan, where there is quite a lot of, and also Denmark, where there is a resorting to use of drugs and alcohol in the family. And this all leads to family dysfunction, family separation, I'm afraid. Now, again, I'd like to go back to my colleague in Kenya to speak a little bit about some of those situations I've just mentioned in detail and the findings in her country.
Thank you very much. And so as we proceed, we did this word cloud to just help us as we keyed in all the information children gave on the sticky notes. And as you can see, it shows the lack of or the presence of. And as we ask children what makes children happy at home or what makes them sad at home, they talked of lack of parents, lack of food, lack of, I think you've moved a slide. Thank you. Yeah, so lack of parents, lack of food, lack of time, lack of their fathers. They talked of the presence of being beaten, being punished. They talked about issues of forced marriage. They talked about missing their loved one. They talked about misunderstanding, and I'm picking just some of them. They talked about the presence of sexual violence or sexual abuse, drug abuse at home, lack of peace, lack of basic needs, lack of people to support them. And this really evidenced that a lot of the children then did not find what was good to support them. But on the other hand, they said what makes children happy at home is when the parents are there, the father is at home, the mother is at home, they eat together, and all that is featured in this. But as we go on with the findings, Chrissy, there were some things that came out very strongly, and the one was the issues of violence. And this came out very strongly that violence at different levels, either physical, sexual, or emotional, and neglect was there. But I would like to highlight that what strongly came in the discussions, what makes children unhappy, was aspects of physical violence and sexual abuse. And the sexual abuse actually came up either within the homes or within the schools. And this was both in the middle income and urban areas, whereas in a comparatively rural area. And this brought out the fact that actually abuse or violence within homes or within the environments makes children unhappy, and therefore it's a source of a point where children are moved from homes and into the institutions. But on the other hand, the other finding that we did establish in our study and in Kenya was the aspect of institutionalization or having alternative care. At the point of this study, there were 845 charitable institutions in Kenya and 30 statutory institutions. I know the current study findings show 901 charitable institutions. Now, two issues come up as far as alternative care is concerned. That one was the issue of social care and education. And so children who experienced violence at home or experienced neglect at home went to the charitable institutions for the sake of protection and care. And some are in the institution, the statutory institutions, because they are in conflict or contact with the law and therefore seeking rehabilitation and change. However, this institution also served as places to provide food that was lacking at home, education that they could not afford. But I need to mention, although vulnerable children were in these places, some of these institutions serve as education centers. And so we find that even parents from high income areas, therefore, taking their children into boarding schools. Now, we are only talking of 845. However, it's important to notice these are the registered ones, but there were many more unlicensed or unregulated, which we do not have the statistics right now. Thank you. And moving to the next one. Now, one of the things that we did was to get into the deep dive in Kenya and the decision making. Who makes the decision to have the children to go to institutions? And out of this, we found there were several issues, positive and negative, but one of them insufficient human resources and financial investment, especially in the social service network, lack of ongoing training opportunities, lack of opportunities for shared decision making, and that's amongst the social actors, the justice, the magistrate, and all that. Lots of legislation. Actually, Kenya is known as one of the countries with so many good legislations. However, implementation is the challenge. Monitoring and regulating alternative care providers, and then funding for social care. Why? Because there's already money available either to support the existence of CCIs or the boarding schools where the children go to. And that was one of the key findings in the decision-making or gatekeeping. And the other thing that comes in, we find that the objectivity, therefore, becomes an issue. I would want to highlight that, yes, we did lots of discussion with the gatekeepers in Kenya. And as we lifted that, there is one clear point in Kenya that the children officer has really the right and the final decision after doing all the necessary follow-up to recommend then this child, and now with the magistrate, then this child is either committed to an institution or they are given an alternative care. And I want to read this quote just from one of the interviewees. We have a lot of discrimination coming in on the basis of how we have been brought up. Our religious beliefs, our cultural beliefs, all those things coming together, having molded person who they are today. Of course, they will affect how you make decisions. And therefore, culture and other issues affected how decisions were made. And that therefore affects the decisions that are made for children to be taken into institutions. We know that studies have indicated some judicial decisions making in Kenya is marked by bias and tribalism, and therefore it's something to check, but there were cases of the reports we received where due process is done and made effectively. Thank you. Over to you, Chrissy.
Thank you very much. So I think just to highlight one thing that Dr. Olympic just said, which is a very important finding, is money is going in to sustain residential institutions rather than that money going to support families. And this pull of social care, particularly in places like Kenya, Indonesia, Lebanon, means that it's an easy decision for a social worker to place a child in care rather than to find the funds and the support that families need. I'm going to leave you with this slide, this one, last but one slide, just overview of some of our main findings. There were many, and I want to show this lack of data, and that's why this research report was so important, because if governments don't have data, if organizations don't have data, they cannot effectively understand what are the reasons for separation and why children are going into alternative care. I want to just read this one quote as well, because I think one of our unique findings was the intergenerational aspect of violence and parenting that's not being really looked at in services. And a child in Kenya said, taking out frustration and anger on your children because of how your parent raised you filled your heart with hate and bitterness. It affects the life of your child. And so to finish, quite importantly, what we need to do is listen to what children and young people said. And these are the things that are going to keep families united. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Chrissy. So now just with a view to bringing together the important findings presented by Chrissy and Rosaline from the field research, as well as those from the literature scoping, we have understood that children are separated from their families due to multifaceted and interconnected factors in a child's environment, including at the individual, family, community, and societal levels that put a family's caregiving and protective relationships at risk. This is especially true when parents or caregivers do not have access to the resources and strategies needed to cope with the challenges they face. Notably, the findings suggest that separation is neither the result of one factor alone, nor is it the result of just family dynamics, but rather the interplay between factors and the environments in which children and families live, and whether they can access support within the community, wider society, and the state support system for families. So some highlights from the research include is that the research has found a lack of accessible, basic and specialized support services in many of the countries, for example, in family support, which is then further exacerbated by easy access to alternative care, driven by beliefs that children are better off in care and by funding structures that incentivize institutional placements. Moreover, the findings show that further societal factors such as violence in schools and society at large, multiple issues related to poverty and inequality, and harmful sociocultural norms can perpetuate stigma, discrimination, and social exclusion, for example, of children with disabilities. These factors can put pressures on family systems, which can lead to harmful practices such as abuse, violent discipline, child neglect, or recourse to negative coping mechanisms like substance misuse. And these are often because of unaddressed adverse childhood experiences and lack of informal and formal support networks. And finally, a family's situation can be further exacerbated by life course circumstances like parental death, disability, or poor physical or mental health. And the interplay of these factors can bring children to the attention of the child protection authorities, for example, in cases involving violence against children, child labour, or street connectedness. And the ability of the child protection system to function as an effective gatekeeper is crucial to ensuring that separation occurs only when necessary, in the child's best interests and as a last resort. Members of the social services workforce, including social workers, child protection officers, judges, alternative care providers, and other relevant decision makers, talked about how they often face very challenging and emotional situations and must take difficult decisions about a child's case, sometimes based on limited knowledge, training, and high degrees of uncertainty. And this is further compounded by high caseloads, pressure, limited recognition, and support for these professionals. So many of the professionals involved in the research indicated that decisions regarding child protection cases are not always appropriate. And in some countries, children are separated and placed in alternative care not due to protection reasons, as mentioned by Rosaline, but for access to services like education, healthcare, food, or clothing, contradicting international guidance that poverty alone should never be a reason for separating children and placing them in care. And even in a well-resourced system like Denmark, where child protection was found to be the principal reason for separation, professionals highlighted that decision-making is based sometimes on economics and budgets and access to funded services. And so now it's my pleasure to hand over to my colleague, Dr. Claudia Risi, who will be sharing more about the recommendations of the research.
Thank you very much, Rosie, and thanks everyone for listening. I would like to start by providing you some background around the recommendations. They have been developed based on the key findings of the research, the international policy and legal framework assessment, but also the solutions proposed by children, young people, families, and professionals themselves that have taken part in the research. We released these recommendations on the International Day of Care and Support to join the United Nations efforts to raise awareness on the importance of care for our societies. And we call on governments to transform care and support systems to prevent the unnecessary separation of children. Prevention yields multiple benefits across child development, socioeconomic stability, resilience, but it's also a smart way to use public funding because it's so much impactful to train or to strengthen caregivers and families to take care of their children rather than continuing reacting to emergencies when the crisis has already hit the families. This will actually overburden justice and social service systems instead. Our recommendations work across all the environments where a child grows up, and also across sectors from child protection to education to social protection. Moving to the next slide, I would like to summarize briefly what are the key priorities we have identified for policy making. The first is to enhance preventive child protection to achieve safer and supportive families and communities. The second is to ensure basic living standards and social inclusion for all, while the third is to implement people-centered policies and services. Starting from the first priority, we provide three main recommendations. The first, as you have heard, is to really scale up anti-violence programs, as violence is one of the main reasons for separation. And we talk about violence against children, gender-based violence, community violence like gang violence, domestic violence, of course. And this can be done through anti-violence legislation, its enforcement, but also awareness campaigns. And importantly, we need to secure support for victim survivors. The second is to expand the parenting support programs to shift parenting practices and break harmful intergenerational cycles. This can be coupled also in the case of families already at risk with some extra family strengthening support, such as MHPSS or other forms of support. Regarding the third recommendation here, I cannot extensively go into it, but I would like to highlight the importance of reforming child protection systems, particularly starting from the gatekeeping mechanisms, because children need to be placed in alternative care only when it's in their best interest, and this is not happening. And we also need to invest in family-based options for children who have lost parental care. We need to prioritize stable family solutions, including support the reintegration of children back to their families whenever this is in their best interests. Also, we need to empower care and child protection professionals, as you have heard from my colleagues, because they really operate in difficult and challenging circumstances without emotional support, without resources, training, without guidance, supervision, and poor working conditions, and I may add, little social recognition. The second group of recommendations talk about basic living standards, and the best way to achieve this is to implement reforms that create inclusive social protection systems, at least for those countries who have less developed welfare systems, to try and achieve basic floors for securing basic income and access to healthcare. Moreover, as part of social protection policies, we need to think about different ways to include underrepresented groups in the labor market. Think about young people, people with disabilities, women, and family-friendly policies that can help balance care and work life are also crucial to make sure that we give fair opportunities for an income to everyone. Another important recommendation is to remove barriers to access services, and I may say free or at least affordable services, whether basic like education or housing, or in the case of families who are at risk of separation, more thorough family strengthening programs. The final recommendation for this priority is to promote gender disability and age inclusive systems. This means to work at the legislative level, but also at the education awareness raising level to shift norms and to challenge caregiving stereotypes, to challenge patriarchy, to challenge the idea that we cannot share caregiving roles between men and women, but also the idea that we cannot take care of a child with disability and therefore it's much better to place the child in institutional care. This needs to end. Finally, we call for people-centered policies and services. This means that we need to base our system design and delivery on data and on evidence. Therefore, we call for more investments in data collection on the root causes of family separation, as well as research on the strategies to address it. We call for partnerships that are multi-stakeholder with state and non-state actors collaborating, as well as multi-sectoral, and also done in a way that the services are coordinated and integrated and the end user actually can access them without having to run across different offices to try to sort out their challenges. And this is actually something we have found being a good practice is the one-stop family center. Finally, we, of course, encourage everyone to work to promote the participation of children and families. It should be mandatory as far as the decisions of their care is concerned, and also children and families need to be involved in the development of policies and services to make sure that they respond to their needs. To conclude, of course, I've just scratched the surface today. I could not expand on the recommendations. I invite you to start considering contextualization at national, regional, global level, depending on your work focus. And I invite you certainly to explore more in the full report, which is available as of today on our website. You will find there is a roadmap for transforming care and support systems to put an end to the unnecessary separation of children from their families. Thank you.
Jeg tror, grund til, at nogle børn ikke kan bo sammen med deres familier, kan være rigtig mange ting. Det kan både være, at de er født ind i en dårlig situation, rent økonomisk, eller psykisk, eller fysisk.
Nogle af de konsekvenser, et barn kan have, hvis de ikke opvokser i deres familie, kan være sådan noget som tilknytningsevner. At fordi det kan være, at der er en forælder, der har forladt dem, at de har svært med at så stole på andre, og stole på, at de vil være der for dem, og de bliver hos en. Og der er jo mange ting, der kan gøre et barn utryg i en familie. Der er nogle gange, hvis der er rigtig mange børn, at de bliver glemt. I værste tilfælde er der nogen, der slår dem.
Однажды жил одна семья, был мальчик, мама. И однажды папа умер из-за болезни рака. И потом у них не было ничего, потом они решили работать, его мама ушла в Россию. Если мама была, говорят, там, мы поступили так, она не могла бы работать здесь, там, не мог найти решение, он попал в депрессивную, стрессовую состояние, и вот из-за этого у него появилось самоубийство, мысли такие. Из-за того, что он попал в стрессовую состояние, ему никто не помог.
Көптөгөн себептердин ата энеси көзөмөлсүз калат. Социалдык, экономикалык үй бүлөнүн абалынын негизинде ата энелердин өз каалоосу менен ошо балдарын да ошо интернат типинде балдар мекемесине калтыруусу. Үй бүлө кодексинин жаңы долбоору иштелип чыккан министрлик тарабынан, алдын алуу багытында иштелип чыккан. Бул бүгүнкү күндө үй бүлө кодекси коомдук талкуулоого илинип, тиешелүү министрлик ведомство менен макулдашуу процесси жүрүп жатат.
Jeg tror, det har gjort rigtig meget godt, at jeg har haft 2 forældre, der har forstået mig rigtig godt. Det gik lidt tid. De ville gerne lære, og det var meget fedt at se, at de gerne ville det. De gerne ville have, at de kunne gøre ting bedre for mig. Der gik lidt tid, men så fik hele min familie hjælp.
Our thanks to our colleagues in Kyrgyzstan and Denmark for that video. Children's voices in talking about their lived experience of losing their families. To save on time, I'll introduce this next panel. So now that we have known what the report talks about, where do we go from here? What is the responsibility of decision makers and policy makers in making this, in making progress? I think sometimes we wonder, will Will all this information make a difference? Well, we have 3 discussants today, 4 discussants actually, who can walk with us and tell us their views. Okay, Dr. Dominic Richardson is the Managing Director of the Learning for Wellbeing Institute. He joins us having served at UNICEF's Global Education, Social Policy, and Economic Analysis Research at Innocenti from 2015 to 2023. He also worked at OECD on a broad range of studies covering child well-being, family policies, and social impact investment. He's an author, and he's written a book titled What Makes Me, which reviews global literature on age-related child development of innate human skills. And a second piece as well called Too Late, Too Little, which looks into age-related spending for children worldwide. We also have from Thailand, Mr. Wanchai Rojanavong. I hope I've said your name right, sir. Mr. Rojanavong is Thailand's representative to the ASEAN Commission on the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Children and Women. He comes to us as a senior consultant prosecutor in the Office of the Attorney General of Thailand, having served as the Director General for International Affairs, Labor, Litigation, and Correction Departments. He is an expert in trafficking of persons with UNODC, having represented Thailand on negotiations on UN conventions against transnational and organized crime. He holds a law degree from Cornell and Oxford universities. Okay. From Europe, we have Dr. Astrid Podsialowski, who is the head of the social rights sector and is a project manager on rights of the child at the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights. She provides evidence-based advice to European and national decision makers through research and data analysis on policies, legislation, and statistics, covering a wide range of topics, including child-friendly justice, child participation, child poverty, and social inequality. Last but not least, certainly, we have Honorable Anne Musiwa, who is the Special Rapporteur for Children Without Parental Care at the African Union. She's a member of the Committee of the Rights of she is a member within the Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, has served as vice chairperson on that committee. She's rapporteur, and she has also been country rapporteur for South Sudan, Eritrea, Somalia, Uganda, Seychelles, where she advocates for children's rights across the continent. So there's so much to say about this distinguished panel, but let's hear from them. Very warm welcome to you, Dominic. Over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Anne. I hope you can hear me well. It's an honor to be here to discuss the report amongst many distinguished colleagues and participants. The report for me is really comprehensive. I mean, the participatory nature, the multi-sectoral nature. It spans a range of countries, which I think are good in terms of their perspectives for a global sample. Obviously speaking to children, professionals, parents. It gives us great insights from multiple perspectives on what must be done to help children separated or at risk of being separated from their families. But I also believe it offers a framework which is good for all children. I think the evidence underlines calls for a multi-layer, multi-sectoral effort to ensure that a comprehensive portfolio of welfare policies are available to every child. Such an approach is in line with the UNCRC, as the right not to be separated from his or her parents against their will, unless in their best interest, is actually indivisible from and influenced by the full array of rights that are promised to each child by almost every government worldwide. The approach recognizes that a comprehensive and inclusive set of family policies and child policies is essential to meet these promises, not least of which is well-funded professional child protection services. And it points out the need to protect children not just from close-to-home vulnerabilities, violence, ill health of caregivers, addiction, poverty, housing instability, but also recognizes that there's issues in the community space and issues in the public space, such as weak or non-existent child protection, social protection systems. What's more is it's underscoring the role that external factors have, like conflicts and climate crises, I think, which are increasingly putting pressures on families globally, how they might affect the ability to deliver on a comprehensive set of policies for children to fulfill their rights and protect them from family separation. Well, how they might affect that. These external factors can be mitigated and addressed, and in some instances still prevented. It's worth reading the World Social Protection Report this year on those issues. In recognizing this ecology of drivers or risks, the study then calls on stakeholders to address these risks in the same way at an ecological level, from a national policy as well as a community level and a family level, enabling families to take up benefits and services that are now available to them, the use of community outreach and family participation that can promote positive family environments and parenting methods, things that prevent the situation that is the reality for so many children. And I mean, some very disturbing findings we've heard today. So I sometimes try and explain the situation, the policy situation, with a metaphor to get the implications of delivering in a multi-sectoral way. So I'd like you to imagine like you're thinking of a fish that lives with a school of fish in a polluted pond in a sick forest. Well, efforts to promote the health and well-being of that fish alone won't be sustainable unless the school are treated and the pond is clean and the forest is healthy and the air around is clean too. So the policy implications here are clear. As in the report, we need a call for coordinated, comprehensive action. Prevention-focused but treatment-ready, multi-layered, multi-sectoral intervention for children. Something that's entirely possible to achieve. It may take more time, it may take more money, and more evidence to do it in the best way, but it's really achievable. In my recent work looking at finance on the Too Little Too Late study, we reflect on barriers to getting the basics out. And I'm concerned about the lack of public expenditure on children outside compulsory school systems worldwide. Just recently with UNICEF, we published a study on sub-Saharan Africa and revealed that apart from public schooling, public spending on children remains very low. A child born into a low-income country can expect maybe $11,000 spent across their life course, and not just 2.3 if they don't go to school. In contrast, in a high-income country, it's $195,000 per child, about a third of which is reserved for the youngest. The lack of finance and the design in the existing expenditures of social, the lack of expenditure of social protection and effective and statutory child protection systems leave too many families and children vulnerable with limited engagement with critical public interventions. A focus on education means that children get more support when they stay in school, rewarding the ability to stick to the system and reinforcing intergenerational inequality, hiding vulnerabilities indeed. This gives me the impression that, and like with the report, sometimes money is going in the wrong areas, picking up efforts for treatment or out-of-home care rather than prevention in social protection. This systemic failure in public policies for children serves to widen inequalities within and between countries, and it's inequalities that are at the heart of so many social ills. I fear the trend that we're going, the way we're managing public policies, which this report challenges, is sending us backwards rather than forwards. As we try to go forwards with public policy, we're actually creating inequality. I also think there's a role for foreign assistance, but I don't really have time to talk about that. Within all of this report, there's a simple policy implication, at least for my mind, that our systems for delivering on children and human development, both domestically and internationally, need to be reevaluated, and policy action must catch up with the evidence. We must continue to work to create better systems for children that not just treat social ills quickly and consistently and professionally, as noted in the report, but mitigate or prevent that which is yet to come. So I'm going to stop now. I think my time is up. But I just want to thank SOS Children, Villages and Power Partners for this powerful work, and thank everybody here who presents, everyone here present actually, who shares the commitment the strengthening systems for children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominic, and thanks for joining us today and for your insights. Fantastic. Over to our next discussant. Over to you.
Thank you. I'm very honored to participate in this discussions. In this part of the world, in Southeast Asia, the pull factor is poverty. Because most of the separation here in this region is mostly for economic separation. Parents have to go to work in a distant area in the cities mostly, and sometimes it's not convenient to bring children with them. So they have to leave the children with grandparents or uncle or whatsoever, which have quite a serious effect mentally on children. Moreover, we still have my grandchildren, which is the parents migrate to work in another country, cross border to work in another country for the benefit of getting job and earning more. And so the children was left home. This is the most kind of separation in this region. Because in Southeast Asia, the social welfare system is not very good. And poverty is here nearly everywhere when you compare to the developed country. So most of the parents have to struggle to go to work overseas or work in the cities. Some of them bring their children as well, but because of the situation, sometimes when they go to work in the cities in another country, they bring the children with them, but then they divorce or they separated, and then they remarried again. Sometimes the child was left without the parents. No either parent would like to take care of them. However, one good thing is that legal separation here can be done only by the decision of the court. And the reason that the court will deprive of the right to parental is that living with a parent is dangerous to the betterment of the child. For example, the parents who brought the child to sell for sexual service or use the child to distribute narcotic for their own gain. In that case, the court will have to make a decision, a hard decision, but the decision will be decided by the juvenile court, not ordinary court. Exception to this rule is that abandoned infants, mostly the infant which is born from teenage mother out of wedlock, and the father is not responsible for it. So in this case, adoption is the best solution to find alternative parents to all these children. So divorce is one of the case, and the number of divorce is growing every year. The worst case in case of divorce is when children living with one parent and then they remarried again. And they have to live with the stepfather or stepmother, and violence may happen in that situation. So I think that the solution here is we have to change the policy and possible to create a better welfare, and we have to have a very strong policy and strong law enforcement against violence against children. And we have to try to find a way to reduce divorce. I think my time is up now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very, very much, sir. Very important to see how things can change. Over to you, Astrid. We cannot hear you. Maybe is your sound on?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay,
yeah.
Super. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, what I appreciate about the report and as well now this webinar is really the diversity of experience and views, but still that you can see the common threads. And I would bring in the more European perspective from the work that we are doing. And I first wanted to, congratulate you to your work. I think it's a very relevant piece of work with regard to the review of existing evidence and relevant to really have a good resource for relevant academic research, and also like your glossary of key definitions, which will be in the report, I think are very useful, as well as the methodology is recommendable. You really look into the different levels, the family, the community, the society, and you really learn from children themselves about their experiences. So this really enables a holistic picture, and the child protection systems are very complex. So I think that's very helpful. What I also thought is quite interesting that you divide the report into two parts. And like, firstly, when you identify factors contributing to the separation of children, I think that's very helpful to really see how to improve prevention and early intervention measures, as this is also one of the key findings that we have. And the other point that you then analyze what influences child protection decisions on separation points very clearly at existing gaps in current child protection systems. And I must really say that the findings that you reveal are very much mirrored by the work that we have been doing. And just a few words, I work at the Fundamental Rights Agency of the European Union, and we provide so-called evidence-based advice on the fulfillment of fundamental rights, as enshrined in the Fundamental Rights Charter. And Article 24 specifically addresses the rights of the child. And we do this by a so-called social legal approach. So we conduct primary research, quantitative and qualitative, as well as legal analysis and secondary data analysis, like from Eurostat data, for example, or other EU-wide surveys. And for us, of course, it's always interesting to learn from methodologies across the world and linkages to the themes also in other international organizations. What I wanted to link now a little bit kind of the work we have been doing in the area of child protection and the findings that we have, and what I learned from the findings of your report. One point I wanted to refer to firstly is the question why children are separated from their families. And in our case, we mainly look at the societal and systemic factors, and we can also see that challenging life circumstances put children at a particular risk, and that the inability of the child protection system can lead to the unnecessary separation of children from their families. And within the European context, I wanted to point out at research we did with children fleeing from Ukraine, and this is, I think, a very clear example how the child protection systems actually fail for appropriate protection. And one point that has also been seen in your work is the really difficult access to healthcare and counseling, and the insufficient mental health support. This is also mirrored by the work we've been doing on the fundamental rights impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And again, here, particular risk factors become evident, and you also address those questions of inequalities, unequal access. And in our work, we really see that the risks are really exacerbated when you belong to an ethnic minority group, when you're at risk of poverty or have a disability, and that protection is not appropriate, and there's a severe lack of support for the individual, the family, and the community. So we do see these gaps in your work and in our work. I mean, you address like the lack of capacity and support for social services workforce, the dysfunction in parts of the child protection system, the lack of referral options, service availability. And I do see a very strong link to the efforts by the Commission, and wanted to point at the new Commission recommendation on the development and strengthening of integrated child protection systems in the best interests of the child. And also previous speakers pointed at very important components of a move towards more integrated child protection systems. I'll give a few highlights related also, which I would highlight from the findings that I saw in your report, because what we did in cooperation with the Commission, that we mapped child protection systems in all European Union member states. We published this in January this year, and there will be also more in-depth analysis coming at the beginning of next year. And we do see actually in this data research, collection and analysis, there has been progress in diversifying alternative care options. But finding optimal care is hindered by a shortage of foster families, particularly those equipped for children with special or complex needs. And we also see very strong deinstitutionalization efforts, but also a lot of still existing barriers, which is also, for example, a lack of awareness about the cost effectiveness and the benefits of family communities-based care, which, for example, also Claudia mentioned, or Dominic, also with the lack of child-specific budgeting. So with regard to your recommendations, yes, we very much see the need for more focus on prevention and early intervention programs like family support, parenting, education, mental health services, more access to support in family and community-specific work, but also the training for children, families, professionals, and the society at large on recognizing violence. When it comes to your recommendation about social inclusion, we really do see that in some European Union member states, Roma children and children with disabilities are overrepresented in child protection systems, especially in residential care, and this is often due to poverty and material deprivation. So when you recommend people-centered policies and services, I want to come back to the point when we talk about reforming child protection systems, they should be more integrated, which means a multi-sectoral collaboration, interagency coordination. So all this work has to kind of be linked horizontally and vertically. The need for continuous data collection, monitoring and evaluation, and community involvement. So from our side, we continue to work on these aspects closely with key partners, with the Commission on the implementation of the recommendation, and will also next year particularly focus on capacity building activities. So yeah, so I think there are a lot of promising activities by different actors to move forward. Thanks.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so very much for that. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Honorable Anne Musiwa from the African Union. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Anne, for giving me the opportunity in my capacity as the Special Rapporteur for Children under Parental Care in Africa to witness the launching of the global reports on children's care and protection. The flagship report comes at a time when globally experts have begun to sincerely interrogate means and ways of reducing child-family separation. To this effect, I commend SOS Children's Villages for investing resources towards this initiative. Your contributions to policy, practice, and knowledge development are again today witnessed. This is a huge achievement, and let me say congratulations and well done. Let me hasten to say that the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, Article 19, takes into cognizance that every child shall be entitled to the enjoyment of parental care and protection, and that no child shall be separated from his parents. In recognition of the importance of children growing up being nurtured in their own families, the committee established a mechanism which should critically look into this issue of children separating from parents by having a special rapporteur on children without parental care. And the committee further embarked on a continental study on children without parental care in Africa, so as to have scientific data on causes, magnitude of the problem, normative frameworks in place, among others, so as to guide and inform policy and legislation. Going through the flagship report, I'm particularly impressed by the involvement of children, young people, and the cooperation with multiple universities across the world. From my reading, I found the report to be objective, factual, and participatory, as 1,179 people participated in the research. The findings of the global report, which is to be launched today, resonates well with those of the continental study on children without parental care in Africa, such as the need for more precise definitions, clarity, who is the child who is being separated from their family or from their parent. We also resonate on the enhanced data collection, where the report recommends that we need to have disaggregated data, which is very clear and which captures that which will assist the states to monitor implementation progress towards care reform systems. Some of the factors contributing to the separation of children from their families, which came through in the findings of this flagship report, extend from poverty, natural and man-made disasters, climate change, and violence in the families, which also came out with the study report for the children without parental care. The findings of the situation on the ground in the flagship report gives a reflection also of the continental study, especially looking at areas as a lack of capacity and support for the social services and workforce, which is very, very critical, where we need to ensure that children are protected and they remain in their family systems. Dysfunction in parts of the child protection system, where there is poor enforcement of laws for it to be realized and strengthened, and also unclear referral options and service availability. I envisage that, referencing to the flagship report, it will make significant contributions to the ongoing work of the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, as it can inform. The committee is in the process of developing a general comment on Article 25, which focuses on child-family separation. We're also developing a continental monitoring tool and a continental transitional framework for children without parental care. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity afforded to me to be part of and witness the launching of this flagship report. The committee and also myself in my capacity as Special Rapporteur for children without parental care in Africa are grateful for the technical and financial support which SOS Children's Villages are giving for the cause of children without parental care in Africa, and to ensure that care reform systems become a reality. It is my hope that we will continue to work together to bring positive change to children without parental care and those at risk of losing parental care. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much, Honorable Musiwa. Ladies, gentlemen, and others, we have guests. We've come to the hour. We had a few questions that came in, but we want to respect your time, as we started on time and you came on time. So as promised, we will send a question and answer sheet to you as we have your information. Before we leave, I want to say tremendous thanks to so many people who've been part of writing, researching, and working on this piece of work and pulling together these findings to share with the world. But most of all, to the children, young people, families, and professionals working in Côte d'Ivoire, Denmark, El Salvador, Indonesia, Kenya, Kyrgyzstan, Lebanon, and Uruguay. These are some of the countries where we work in around the world to ensure that children have the bonds that they need to grow. I would like to say thank you so much for joining us. There's so much information we want to share with you. Please have a look at the chat where we share the links to our website. You will also see links to our social media, and we ask that you interact with the videos that we've shared, and tell someone. Too many children are being separated from their family. It's in the millions, the tens of millions, and it can end if we improve as governments, as individuals, and as families. On behalf of my colleagues and I, have a very good evening, a very good morning, and a very good night, wherever you are in the world. I'm Anne Mitaru, and thanks for joining us as SOS Children's Villages. Goodbye.